Hey folks, this is Colin Richards, president and founder of Lord & Richards, and I'm delighted to be talking to you in this segment. One of our advisors, Tim, just shared with me really an interesting story. This woman had kind of an old lumpy mattress, and her kids saw it and said, look, we're going to give mom a gift. And we're going to go out and buy her a new mattress. And so sure enough, they went behind the scenes, kind of snuck around her and replaced that old lumpy mattress with a beautiful new mattress. And when she came in, they thought she would be surprised and delighted, but she was mortified. She said, I had $100,000 in that mattress. Well, fortunately, the story ends well and they recovered the money. But you know what? Nobody's insuring your mattress, right? And so we need to have our money safe in the bank. If it's emergency kind of money, short-term kind of money, I would say up to 6 months, but not more of the same expenses. So your minimum balance may be, if you've got expenses of $5,000 a month, would be $15,000. If your expenses are $10,000 a month, maybe $30,000. But at most, 6 months. So just double that number, somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000. You say, yeah, but what if something comes up? Well, then we want to look at some more long-term type money. It's still going to be liquid to you, so we got to keep it liquid. But then we have two other levers we can pull, and that's safety and growth. Well, this money we're going to call a growing reserve. Think of it as being red, and here's why. This is the one place I want you to tolerate risk, right? This is the one place I want you to tolerate risk. This is kind of our market money. It's liquid, so it's available to you as a reserve. It's invested, so it can grow potentially more than your CDs and savings accounts and money markets, but it is at risk, right? We understand we only get two of those three, safety, growth, and liquidity. We got to pick two. It's kind of like the menu down at Panera, the pick two menu, soup, salad, half sandwich, right? Well, here it's safety, growth, and liquidity. And on our emergency money, the money down at the bank, it's safe, it's liquid, not growing that much. On this reserve, we call it the growing reserve, the red money, because it has risk. So it's growing, it's liquid, not as safe, right? You say, well, I don't want to have any risk. That's okay. At Lord & Richards, we have a lot of clients who are pretty conservative in their outlook. That's okay. We can help you design that. But most folks are comfortable with a certain level of risk, and we call that the safety percentage at Lord & Richards. And when we sit down together, all of our planning is completely free to you. There's absolutely no reason not to have a plan. And that's for our clients, right? That's something that we do for you. But when we sit down in our initial visit, we're going to ask you some questions around risk, right? How low are you comfortable seeing your portfolio drop when the market inevitably turns down, right? When the market gets into one of its volatile fits, right? We can see it drop 5%. 10%. Up to that point, we call it a correction. After that, it starts to get pretty bad, right? We start to talk about bear markets at 20%, right? And it gets really bad, like a 2008, 40% losses, right? Somewhere along that line, you would rather never see more than a certain amount of loss. We'll actually work together to discover that number, and we'll build and design your portfolio so that you don't breach that. That's the Lord & Richards safety percentage, and it's a commitment we make to you and to all of our clients. That's something others just aren't doing, right? People are asking you, are you comfortable with the risk, not comfortable with the risk? And then they throw you in a model portfolio. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about this and risk, but I want you to understand in this red money, the growing reserve, we're going to accept some risk, but we're going to utilize techniques that Lord & Richards calls institutional risk management to mitigate that risk, right? We're not going to have an unlimited trap door under your feet. We're going to minimize the risk to keep it within that safety percentage. So I'll talk to you more about that in our next episode. But today I want to visit with you. I want to get to know you. I want to talk to you about your needs, your goals, your values. Wherever you are in your financial journey, we're ready to help you. It simply starts with a phone call. Hi friends, Colin Richards here. I'm president and founder of Lord & Richards, and I'm back with you in this segment of the Lord & Richards Show, and we're talking about really our responsibility as stewards of what God's entrusted us. And one of the things that I get asked a lot is, Colin, how do I invest to be a good steward, right? We're stewards, not owners. God has entrusted us with usually pretty abundant resources, and He wants to invest for His kingdom and for His glory. And that goes beyond just giving. It really has to do with how we invest our portfolio. And this is a mistake sometimes believers make, where we're talking to people who really have no kingdom perspective, no biblical perspective, and are investing the way the world does, right? So we don't necessarily want to follow that path because we have a different perspective. As the old song says, this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through, right? And so how do I invest so that I am doing a good job as a steward? Right? Because I want to give a good account of that. And we talked about having, first of all, a emergency reserve, like a short-term reserve of 3 to 6 months of your average monthly expenses. Not more than that, not less than that. That's just about right. That's Goldilocks. You say, well, can I put $200,000 there? Well, you can. Just realize that you're earning very little interest and your stewardship may suffer as a result of that, right? So we want to be the best stewards we can. And so the next kind of money is the growing reserve, not the emergency or short-term reserve, but the growing reserve. We color the emergency money blue because we think that's really liquid and safe. We color the growing reserve red because we think that's where my risk is. It's the only kind of money where I want you to have risk, and we call it a growing reserve. Notice I call it a reserve, so it's not really the money I want you to live on. That goes against popular advice, right? Because most people are living off of their at-risk funds. I'm going to encourage you to develop a growing reserve, accept some risk, but let us come along and institutionally manage that with our safety percentage, developing a plan where you'll have a floor under your feet, and we design your portfolio so you don't penetrate that floor, right? Very cool. But then I want you to create a third kind of money. We're going to call this green money. It's kind of our go money. It's the money I want you to live off of, right? And this is a little bit different. This green money, of the three areas we can emphasize or compromise, safety, liquidity, and growth, I want us to emphasize the two things you want the most for the money that you're going to live on month after month, year after year in retirement. Guess what those two are? Well, I think you want safety. Most people in their heart of hearts say, I would really feel better about withdrawing money from safe assets if I possibly could. But the problem is usually we're not getting growth, right? Well, that's because we're in love with liquidity. But if we could compromise a little bit on liquidity, start to invest like a real mature investor, think Warren Buffett. People asked him, they said, Warren Buffett, what's your average holding period on a stock? And he says, forever. Warren Buffett has no plans to ditch that investment unless it starts underperforming, right? But if we can find an investment where we're both safe and growing at the same time on the same dollar, that's different, right? That's not something we hear about every single day. I want you to enjoy that. So this green money, this protected money can still grow. We've always been told, right, that you got to take risk if you want growth. Well, that's not exactly true. There's something else you can compromise, and that's liquidity. Well, let me ask you, if this is the money you need to live on month after month, year after year, do you really want to position it primarily so you could spend it in a day? Right? We'll have plenty of money like that in our blue money, which is our short-term or emergency reserve down at the bank. We'll have plenty of money like that in our red money. That's our growing reserve, invested in stocks, right? All of that is going to be liquid and available for whatever comes down the road. And that red money's there to build wealth, enhance lifestyle, build a legacy, give, whatever it is that God puts in your heart. But this green money, this protected money, I want that to be about your lifestyle and supporting you. Now, some of you are really blessed. You've got pensions. I've got a lot of clients with pensions, and they love it. Together with their Social Security, it's a pretty awesome thing to get guaranteed money every month. Well, first of all, we can help you duplicate that feeling with your protected money, right? And only add to and supplement those pensions with more guaranteed income up to the amount that you're comfortable living on. But let's say you've covered all your expenses. Well, there's one more use for this protected money, and that's to just offset risk in your portfolio. We've been told to use bonds for that. Well, how well have bonds done? In 2022, they lost as much as the stock market, right? So bonds have risk, especially when they're owned in funds. But what I want to do is get a set of no-risk assets that we can put on this side of the portfolio. They're alternative investments that have literally no bottom, no downside, right? You say, well, I don't believe that exists. Well, actually, you probably already do, because if you use a bank, a CD, these kinds of tools come with principal protection, right? Banks are even backed up by the federal government up to a limit. You say, yeah, but they don't grow. Okay, well, what if we could find a way to take that ultra-conservative, safe investment and to turn it into something that will grow? Did you know that back in 1987, Chase Manhattan invented this very investment? Today, they're available in things like market index CDs, structured notes, on and on it goes. But basically, you can place your money where it is no longer at risk outside of the market and generates a low guaranteed return, just like a CD. Let's say we've got $1 million. I do easy math on $1 million. It doesn't matter whether you have $10 or 10 million. But on $1 million, let's say you're getting 4%. That's okay. That's not exciting. But you know what we do? And what Chase Manhattan invented? They take that low guaranteed interest and they reinvest that in highly leveraged options to try to develop a much higher rate of return. And you know, about 7 years out of every decade, the market goes up. That's about the average. We're going to have 3 years of pain and agony, 7 years of blessing. Well, during those 7 years, you can participate as the market goes up in potentially much higher returns than you earn on a typical CD. This even works on good old-fashioned fixed annuities, the kind that have no cost. You may not even be aware that those exist. But folks, the key is we need some money protected, safe and sound outside of the market that you can live on, enjoy on, and reduce your risk. This is part of what we call your retirement freedom review. And I want to sit down and have a conversation with you about it. It simply starts with a phone call.